I sat on the hood of a car near a cafe called Plate 128, watching and waiting. When they finally emerged, her face went pale, and she avoided my gaze entirely. He raised his hands, already on the defensive. I shook my head. Relax. You're not worth it, I said, climbing into my car and driving away. This whole mess had started with a long, tangled history. I'd met Ryan when his family moved in next door. We were both 8, the only boys in the neighborhood, and soon became as close as brothers. By high school, Ryan and I were inseparable. Then, in 10th grade, I met Jessica. We became a serious couple, and by senior year, Ryan was dating Megan Connors. The four of us often went out together. Prom night was something of a milestone. Jessica and I shared our first intimate moment, with Ryan and Megan in the next room doing the same. It felt like we'd crossed a line, one that marked the end of high school and the start of something more adult. After graduation, Ryan joined the Navy while Jessica and I went to college. I studied civil engineering at Central State University, and she pursued graphic design at Riverview College. The schools weren't far apart, but our relationship still struggled. Jessica occasionally canceled our plans, and at first, I didn't think much of it, until friends from Riverview tipped me off that she'd been seen with other guys. One night, I decided to see for myself. I followed her and some guy to a restaurant. When she noticed me, she pulled away from him fast, like she'd been caught. Their chemistry was obvious. This wasn't a one-time meeting. I sat down alone, watching her steal nervous glances my way. I ate my meal, pretending not to notice, and left without a word. Friday, our usual date night, came and went. I didn't call or cancel, just stayed home and read. Saturday, I went to a party at Sigma Alpha, and that's where I met Rachel, a breath of fresh air. By Sunday, I was back in study mode when my doorbell rang. Peering through the peephole, I saw Jessica outside. I opened the door, and she immediately pushed her way in. "Where were you Friday night? And why didn't you answer my calls?" she demanded, glaring. I shut the door and smirked. "Which question do you want answered first?" "What?" She seemed flustered. "You asked 3 questions. Pick one," I replied. "Don't mess with me, Adam." "What's going on?" "Fine." I shrugged. "First, I was here. Then I went to a party on Saturday. As for the phone, it was unplugged. And where was I Friday night?" "Right here, reading a book." "Why didn't you tell me you weren't coming?" "Thought you might be occupied with your boyfriend," I replied, watching her reaction. "Boyfriend? You're my boyfriend, Adam." "Then who was that guy you were practically cuddling with at the restaurant on Thursday?" She rolled her eyes. "Just a friend. It's no big deal." "Looked like more than that." "If it's so innocent, why didn't you say hi or introduce me to him?" She bristled. "Why didn't you come up if it bothered you?" "Because I wanted to see how you acted when you thought I wasn't watching," I replied. "And it looks like what I heard was true, you've been going out with other guys, even on nights we had plans." Her patience snapped. "You don't own me, Adam. We're not exclusive." "Really? That ring and varsity jacket I gave you in high school mean nothing now?" "Adam, that's high school stuff. Grow up." "Fine," I replied. "I met someone at the party. She gave me her number. I'll go ahead and call her." Jessica's face hardened. "Go ahead." "I don't care," she spat, storming out. Watching her leave, I realized she hadn't even tried to make an excuse or promise to change. Nothing. It was like she was already done with me. Maybe she just wanted the freedom to do whatever she wanted, without a second thought. The next week, I focused on my classes. By Thursday, I decided to call Rachel, and we hit it off right away. We made plans for Friday night, and I picked her up for dinner. Afterward, she suggested a party at an apartment in Brookdale. We arrived around 8, and just my luck, the first people I saw were Jessica and the guy from the restaurant. "Great," I muttered. Rachel caught on. "What's wrong?" I nodded in their direction. "Them. Know her?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. I nodded, barely hiding my smirk. "Yeah, that's what she goes by." Rachel laughed. "What did she do to earn that?" "Too much to count," I replied, feeling the finality of it. "Are you really sure about her?" Rachel asked, raising an eyebrow. "What do you call someone who's supposed to be committed but still flirts with other men when her partner's not around?" I shrugged. "That's what I've been wondering. I can't confirm it firsthand, but plenty of guys have stories." "You didn't mention how you know her," Rachel said, curious. "I was the guy she was going to marry, until I caught her last Thursday with the guy she's with now." "Well, at least the drama's behind you." "Yep. We officially ended it on Sunday," I replied, relieved. "What are the odds I'd hear from you if I hadn't caught her Thursday?" "Slim to none," she laughed. "But here we are, so let's enjoy ourselves." She took my hand, leading me to meet the party host. Jessica stood to the side, visibly shocked when she spotted me. Whether it was seeing me with someone else or being caught with her new boyfriend, I couldn't tell, but it didn't matter anymore. I couldn't tell what Jessica was feeling, ignoring her completely as Rachel introduced me to Daniel and his wife, Elise. We chatted for a while before heading downstairs for drinks. The basement had been transformed into a dance floor, and Rachel and I joined the fun. We danced, mingled, and laughed the night away, occasionally catching Jessica's unreadable stares from across the room. Around 11, Rachel suggested heading out since she had plans the next day. As I drove her home, she remarked, "Your ex couldn't take her eyes off you tonight." "Probably surprised to see me there, especially with you," I replied. "No, she seemed pretty uncomfortable seeing you with someone else." "Her problem," I said. "She ended things." "Maybe, but it looked like she regrets it." "Well, she'll have to get used to it," I said firmly. "So, will I see more of you? Or are you going to start dating around?" "I prefer dating one girl at a time. I had a great time tonight. If you're interested, you'll be the only one." "What if I'm not ready for something exclusive?" "Then I'll ask someone else. But if I find someone who says yes, that's who I'll stick with." Rachel smiled. "I like your style. How about tomorrow night?" "Sounds good." I walked her to her door, where she paused before leaning in. "I don't usually kiss on the first date," she whispered, "but there's a first time for everything." She kissed me goodnight, then stepped inside, calling back, "See you tomorrow." When I got home, my dad mentioned that Jessica had called, sounding upset. "It's late," I replied. "I'll call her in the morning." Saturday morning, I slept in and made my way to the kitchen for coffee. "Jessica called twice this morning," my mom said, urging me to return her call. "Not until I've had my coffee." "Are things okay between you two?" I sighed. "It's complicated. She should know why." Just then, the phone rang, and my mom handed it to me. "It's Jessica." "Hello." I answered. "Why didn't you call?" she demanded. "I got in late and went to bed." "That's not what I meant. Why didn't you call me for our usual Friday night date?" "We discussed this last Sunday, Jessica. You said we weren't exclusive and agreed to see other people. When I told you I'd do the same, you stormed off." "That's not what I meant, Adam. You should have understood." "Come on, Jessica. I saw you with that guy last Thursday. You can't tell me that was nothing." "I wasn't with him, Adam. I went alone, and he happened to be there." "Right. Believe what you want, but it doesn't change anything. I've heard enough about you, including why people call you Miss Piggy. I don't know what you've heard, but it's not true. After seeing you with that friend at the restaurant, I'm not buying it. You're not interested in a committed relationship, and I'm not interested in being just one of many. So, please return my ring and leather sweater. They mean nothing to you now anyway. Goodbye, Jessica. Sounds like that's settled, my mom remarked. Yep. She made her choice, and I'm not about to be part of her rotation, I replied. In the meantime, Rachel became a bright spot in my life. I stayed in touch with Ryan through letters. He graduated from training and joined a Navy construction battalion, learning everything from building to demolition. He never asked about Megan, and I didn't bring her up. No point in souring his new life with her drama. Meanwhile, Megan was busy making the rounds. Within a week of Ryan's deployment, she'd moved in with a coworker, then switched to another guy a month later. Rumor had it she was entertaining his friends too. Eventually, she dropped off the map. Then, one day, I got a letter from Ryan. He'd finished his training and was stationed in Norfolk, eager to settle down. I wish you could be my best man, he wrote. The sooner we marry, the sooner we can get housing on base. Poor Ryan. As soon as he left, Megan had found someone else. By junior year, Rachel and I decided to move in together. My grandparents' college fund was more than generous, covering my tuition and even rent for an off-campus apartment. Living with Rachel felt natural, and after about 6 months, I began thinking about making it permanent. Still, I had doubts. It felt almost too perfect. I didn't voice those thoughts until one day, almost offhandedly, I mentioned I'd been looking at engagement rings. That's when Rachel revealed her plan to return to California after graduation to marry her childhood sweetheart, Michael, who was studying abroad on a Rhodes Scholarship. They'd agreed on an open relationship, knowing it was unrealistic to be faithful during years of separation. It won't change things for us, Adam, she assured me. But it did, for me, anyway. Suddenly, what I'd seen as a committed partnership felt more like an arrangement. I realized I wanted something real and lasting, not just a physical connection. Our relationship slowly cooled. About 4 months later, she noticed. You don't seem happy here, do you? She asked one night. I told her the truth, and she nodded, saying she wished she could give me what I wanted but loved Michael too much to let go. We agreed to part ways, and a week later, I was back home in my old room. The next Friday, Mom called up from downstairs, saying someone was there to see me. I came down to find Jessica chatting with her. When Mom saw me, she gave me a knowing look and slipped into the kitchen, leaving us alone. Hi, Adam, Jessica said softly. Hey, Jessica. How have you been? I asked, surprised but curious. She hesitated, then said, Rachel called me. She mentioned you're single again, and, well, she thought I shouldn't waste any time if I wanted to be first in line. I raised an eyebrow. Why compete for a spot at all, Jessica? She gave a small smile and lifted her left hand, revealing my old high school ring still on her finger. I never returned this, Adam. A bit taken aback, I stayed quiet. Then she added, there's a party at Grace Thompson's tonight. Want to come? You know, just to show everyone you're mine again. That night, she made a point of staying close to me, sending a clear message to everyone at the party. It felt strange but also familiar, like slipping back into an old role. On the drive home, Jessica was quiet, staring out the window. When we pulled up at her place, I suggested, how about we look for an apartment together this weekend? It'd be easier than running back and forth. She looked at me, surprised. Are you serious? I nodded. It crossed my mind. Then let's do it, she said, smiling, her excitement clear. Within a week, we found a 2-bedroom apartment between Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti. We converted the second bedroom into an office, setting up desks for both of us, and life settled into an easy routine. For the first time in years, I felt a sense of real stability. About a month later, Ryan came home on leave, and he spent a lot of time with us. Watching him and Megan together, they seemed content, and I started to question my earlier suspicions about her. But 3 weeks after Ryan's return to duty, Megan came over unexpectedly, looking nervous. It wasn't long before rumors spread. With Ryan now in Iraq, she'd been seen with someone else. When Megan finally visited Ryan in Norfolk, I heard more unsettling stories, wild parties and supposed encounters with her ex. I thought about telling Ryan, but Jessica urged me to stay out of it. It's their business, Adam. For all we know, they have an open arrangement. Lots of military couples do. I doubt Ryan's that type, I replied. Maybe, but telling him could just make things worse, she argued. Reluctantly, I agreed to let it go, though I couldn't shake a feeling of unease. Ryan came back from Afghanistan just in time to be my best man when Jessica and I got married. After his discharge, he and Megan moved back home, and Ryan landed a job as a heavy equipment operator. For the next 2 years, the Marshalls became regular visitors, coming over every couple of weeks. They seemed steady, and any suspicion I had about Megan faded over time. Then Ryan's company won a contract to lay a pipeline in Alaska, and he made the tough decision to leave Megan at home, considering the harsh conditions he'd face. Initially, everything seemed fine. But barely a week after he left, Megan was seen at a local motel with Ryan's boss, Daniel Carter. Soon, Daniel's car was spotted parked at Ryan's house almost every night. As the project in Alaska ran into complications, Ryan's absence was extended by another 2 months, leaving him in the dark about what was happening back home. Megan, meanwhile, seemed perfectly content to continue her nightly rendezvous with Daniel, even as neighbors started to notice and talk. Watching it all unfold, I felt deeply for Ryan. Here he was, out there in brutal conditions, working tirelessly to secure a future for them both, while Megan was back home enjoying herself with his boss. I couldn't help but dread the inevitable fallout when he finally returned. It was by pure coincidence that Jessica and Megan shared the same doctor. One day, Jessica was in the waiting room when she overheard Megan receiving troubling news. Megan had just learned that she was 7 weeks pregnant. Yet Ryan had been away on deployment for over 3 months. Jessica didn't hear it directly from Megan. 2 nurses who knew us from high school filled her in later. They had little hesitation to gossip, given Jessica's connection to Megan, and asked her, half in jest, how she thought Ryan might react to the news. In our small-town world, patient confidentiality sometimes bends, especially when old connections are involved. Jessica shrugged it off at first, figuring Megan would handle things discreetly before Ryan returned. She'll probably opt for an abortion, and that'll be the end of it, she guessed, thinking Megan would keep this complication under wraps. But as it turned out, nothing about the situation went as expected. Someone, though Jessica was careful not to say who, got word to Ryan about the pregnancy and the strong suspicions of Megan's affair. When Ryan returned from deployment, he didn't go directly home. Instead, he rented a car and parked a short distance from his own house. He waited, and before long, he saw Daniel Carter. After waiting about 15 minutes, Ryan calmly walked up to the front door, a digital camera in hand. His patience had a purpose. Inside, he took several quick shots, capturing Daniel Carter and Megan together. The confrontation escalated almost instantly. Carter lunged toward Ryan, apparently to grab the camera. Ryan's Canon Rebel, set to continuous mode, documented the sequence, Carter charging at Ryan, Ryan standing his ground. The scene grew so intense that neighbors called the police, who arrived as an ambulance took Carter to the hospital. Initially, the police considered detaining Ryan, but he showed them the photos, which clearly captured Carter advancing toward him. Satisfied that Ryan had acted in self-defense, they let him go. Not long afterward, Megan packed a single suitcase, locked the house, and left, essentially ending her marriage on the spot. The divorce proceeded smoothly after that. Ryan then filed a lawsuit against Carter, alleging alienation of affection and even manipulation, claiming that Carter had strategically sent him away to pursue Meghan. Carter could have settled quietly but chose to fight it, which only made the affair with Meghan even more public. Eventually, the jury sided with Ryan, awarding him a significant $1.3 million. After taxes and legal fees, Ryan was left with over $750,000. He used the money to pay off his house, add a pool, and buy a new truck. Meghan, meanwhile, disappeared from town soon after the divorce was finalized, with rumors circulating that she left out of embarrassment. Carter's reputation took a heavy hit. To pay off the settlement, he had to sell several assets, and his business suffered as clients distanced themselves, wary of his actions. With some of his money still left, Ryan approached me with a business idea: start a construction firm together, taking on the clients Carter had lost. I would focus on design, while Ryan handled the construction side. After some discussion with Jessica, I agreed, and R&J Constructors was born. We quickly attracted a significant number of Carter's former clients and eventually even outperformed him on several key projects. Ryan made sure people knew every time we beat Carter, slowly building our reputation in the industry. The next 5 years flew by. Ryan dated around but never found someone he wanted to settle down with. He often joined Jessica and me for dinners, usually bringing along whichever girlfriend he was seeing at the time. Jessica, meanwhile, was doing exceptionally well in her own career. She had climbed to the role of regional manager and positioned herself as a top candidate for vice president. Our life together felt stable, better than I'd ever hoped. Everything seemed to be in place, but maybe that's when the first cracks appeared. One Tuesday afternoon, just after wrapping up a lunch meeting with a client, I unexpectedly ran into Daniel Carter. He suggested we grab a drink. Though I didn't have any personal animosity toward him, I was curious about his motives. I never believed he'd intentionally sent Ryan out of town just to pursue Meghan. Given her behavior, it seemed more likely she had approached him. As we sat down, Daniel leaned in and asked, "So, how's business?" "Can't complain," I replied, keeping it brief. "Ever thought about selling?" he asked, his tone oddly serious. "Selling? Why would I consider that?" I responded, caught off guard. "To make Ryan your partner," he replied. I laughed. "Are you out of your mind?" Daniel shook his head, pulling a folder out of his briefcase. "Take a look at this." Curious, I opened the folder, and my stomach dropped. Inside were photos of Jessica and Ryan entering a motel room together, holding hands. Other images showed them in various poses, hugging, leaning close, and even kissing in public spots. I stared at the pictures, hardly believing what I was seeing. Daniel sighed, watching my reaction. "Look, I didn't know she was your wife at first. I hired a private investigator, hoping to get something on Ryan. When I got these, I noticed the rings. Then I realized the truth." "Why show me?" I asked, barely containing the mix of betrayal and shock. Daniel looked down. "I never intended to drive Ryan out of town for Meghan. She walked into my office, closed the door, and made her intentions clear. She told me, since you sent Ryan away, you're responsible for taking care of me until he returns. It wasn't my idea." I processed his words as I glanced back at the photos. The betrayal felt staggering. The world I thought I understood now seemed foreign and uncertain. What began as a casual drink had turned into a revelation that left me questioning everything I thought I knew. In that moment, it felt as if the ground had shifted under me, and I could no longer trust anything that once felt certain. This entire disaster fell on Ryan. Everyone knew about Meghan's reputation dating back to high school. Ryan should have seen it, but he allowed himself to be blindsided. Daniel Carter, however, had his own vendetta. "Ryan hit me hard with that lawsuit," he said. "And I'm going to hit back." Daniel's bitterness was evident as he spoke. "Sorry you're caught in the crossfire, Adam. How long has this been going on?" I asked, still stunned by what Daniel had shown me. According to my investigator, over a year, possibly longer, Daniel replied. But if Jessica was careful, why would you suspect anything? Then why the offer to buy me out? I asked, growing wary. What do you gain by becoming Ryan's partner? Daniel leaned forward, his voice low and calculated. Think of it as an equal partnership. Ryan will want plan A, I'll push for plan B, whatever's opposite. I'll control pricing, undercutting until the business sinks. Ryan will suffer, and I'll get my revenge. But so will I pointed out, incredulous. Not entirely, Daniel said smoothly. If it collapses, I can liquidate assets and recover most of my investment. Besides, I have other businesses that'll undercut his bids. So, are you in? Maybe, I replied cautiously, keeping my thoughts hidden. But I'll need to do my own digging first. If I decide to move forward, I'll call you. I threw out a tentative price, and he agreed, saying he'd wait to hear back. Leaving that meeting, I felt blindsided. How had Jessica and Ryan carried this on for a year without me noticing? I hadn't seen a single sign from Jessica, no distance, no change in affection. While the evidence Daniel showed looked solid, I couldn't ignore the possibility of tampering, given his motives. I needed absolute proof before making any drastic moves. I contacted a friend at an insurance agency for a private investigator referral, and within days, I had confirmation. Ryan and Jessica had been meeting weekly at the Comfort Inn on Melrose, usually on Wednesdays. I wasn't sure how Jessica got the time off work, but the investigator provided photos, dates, and receipts. It was undeniable. The path forward was clear, though it wouldn't be simple. I spent 2 hours consulting my lawyer, who outlined my options. Although our state was no fault, the lawyer explained that clear evidence of infidelity could slightly shift asset division in my favor. However, there was still the issue of my stake in the business. Selling it directly would entitle Jessica to half the proceeds, and I couldn't let that happen. I made arrangements to sell my share to Daniel for a third of its actual worth. A third of the payment went into a separate account in my name, and the other 2/3 into an offshore account. We agreed Daniel wouldn't step into the office or claim my desk until the following Monday, giving me time to finalize everything. With the groundwork laid, I put my plan into action. The next Wednesday, I told our receptionist, Maria, that I'd be out for a dentist appointment and might not return if I wasn't feeling well. Once Jessica left for work, I went home and arranged for a locksmith to change all the locks. Then I cleared out our joint bank accounts and the safe deposit box. My lawyer had advised taking only half, but I was resolute. Jessica wasn't getting anything without a fight. Around noon, my investigator called, confirming Jessica and Ryan had checked into room 128 at the Comfort Inn. I drove over, exchanged a few words with the detective, and parked nearby, waiting. When they finally emerged, Jessica froze at the sight of me. Ryan took a step back, his hands raised defensively. I just gave them a slight smirk. Relax. You're not worth it, I said, before turning and leaving. As I walked to my car, a process server approached them, delivering a thick packet of papers. Inside were Jessica's divorce papers and a temporary restraining order requiring her to stay 500 feet away from me and our home. A small measure, but it ensured I'd have some peace during the proceedings. As I drove away, a mix of resolve and disbelief settled over me. Everything had fallen into place almost too smoothly. I'd taken precautions, though, and there was little Jessica could do but contest the terms if she chose. The next few days blurred by in meetings with my lawyer and final arrangements. I hadn't told family or friends, but I knew they'd learn the truth eventually. Strangely, the betrayal now felt like something to accept rather than a wound. Sitting in my empty office on Friday, signing over my stake to Daniel, I thought back to the start of my relationship with Jessica and the easy trust we'd once shared. It felt distant, almost like it had happened to someone else. I wasn't sure what lay ahead, but I knew that whatever came next, it would be on my terms. Securing my exit and unsettling Jessica required some strategy. I fabricated a story claiming a third party had tipped me off about Ryan and Jessica discussing my insurance coverage and business shares. This rumor added suspicion that played right into the restraining order, keeping Jessica out of the house until a hearing determined if it would be made permanent. Meanwhile, she couldn't enter without court supervision, and I had no intention of making keys available for the new locks. As for Ryan, I left him a foreclosure notice, taped to the door of his rental property. On the back of the notice, I scribbled a note. You know how these suits work, right? How does it feel to be on the other side? I thought to myself, relishing the image of Ryan's reaction as I drove away from the motel after they'd been served. Later, I called Daniel. Everything's set, I said. Enjoy your first week. For a week, I left it all behind, Jessica, the company, the lawsuits. I spent my days scuba diving and letting the sound of waves drown out the noise of my life back home. It was the first real break I'd had in years, and each day felt like breathing fresh air after months in a confined space. When I returned and powered up my phone, it flooded with voicemails. Most were from Jessica, as expected, but to my surprise, 4 were from Ryan. He, of all people, had been calling me. I couldn't fathom why. In another lifetime, I might have wanted to hear what he had to say, to get some kind of explanation. But now it all felt meaningless. Their betrayals were theirs to grapple with, and I intended to move forward without their interference. After catching up with my attorney, who knew about my trip, he informed me that Jessica had been calling twice daily, trying to arrange access to the house for her belongings. I was about to instruct him to arrange it when a better idea crossed my mind. I called her myself, and she answered on the first ring, her frustration palpable. I need my clothes and some personal items, she began immediately. They won't let me in, even with court supervision, because I don't have a key. Clothes? I replied, feigning surprise. There's nothing left for you to collect. I donated everything to Goodwill. Didn't need reminders of your betrayal cluttering my life. What? She snapped, her anger unmistakable. You had no right to touch my things. Oh, I had every right, I replied, calm and collected. Just as you had the right to betray me. Goodbye, Jessica. I ended the call, satisfied that I'd left her reeling. The truth was, I hadn't touched her belongings, they were still in the house. But delaying her access and making her feel like her actions had consequences was a small satisfaction. It felt like a way of rebalancing the scales, even if it was petty. Later, I called Maria, our indispensable receptionist who handled everything from office supplies to balancing the books. She picked up right away. Hey, Maria. How's the office holding up? Not well, she replied, sighing. Ryan and Daniel are at each other's throats all the time. Ryan gives orders, Daniel cancels them. Projects are constantly delayed because they can't agree on anything. Last week it got so bad they actually had a physical fight. I chuckled. A fight? Seriously? Oh, yeah. They were shoving each other. Ryan ended up with a broken nose, she said, sounding amused. You're still working there, though. I almost quit, she admitted. Actually, I handed in my resignation last Friday, but Daniel offered to double my salary if I stayed, so here I am. Besides, I've got my own reasons. Reasons? I asked, sensing more behind her words. She hesitated before responding. I never liked Ryan. He's been inappropriate with me for years, even suggesting he'd let me go if I didn't agree to go on a date with him. And we both know what that meant. When I asked what you'd think if he fired me, he had no response. Why didn't you tell me? I asked, surprised. It was personal, she replied. I handled it. But there's a silver lining now, you're available again. I laughed, caught off guard. Fair enough. When I'm ready to start dating, I'll keep you in mind. But for now, I'm keeping a low profile. No problem. Just keep me in mind if you ever need some dinner company. That day, my phone rang 16 times, 14 from Jessica, 2 from Ryan. I deleted every message. Whatever they thought they needed to say, I didn't want to hear it. I spent the evening quietly, making myself a simple dinner and savoring a sense of peace. Then, on a whim, I called Daniel to check in on how his plan was unfolding. Daniel answered quickly, his tone smug. Not bad at all, Adam. I made sure to be at your desk when Ryan arrived. I laughed. How did he take it? He stormed in, demanding to know why I was there, Daniel said with a chuckle. I just smiled and told him I was his new partner. You should have seen his face. He practically turned red with rage. Then he picked up the partnership agreement, and I thought he'd explode. It was priceless. I pictured the scene, feeling a wave of satisfaction. For so long, everything had felt out of my control, slipping away no matter how hard I tried to hold on. But now, finally, I had let go, and it seemed like Ryan and Jessica were now caught in the chaos they had set in motion. That night, for the first time in a while, I felt truly free from the weight of their betrayals. Moving forward felt natural, something entirely within my grasp. Whatever happened next would be on my terms, with no strings attached. Daniel didn't waste any time causing trouble. On his very first day, Ryan ordered fuel for the equipment at the Wilkins site, but as soon as he left the office, Daniel cancelled it. When the loader ran out of fuel, Ryan called Allied and was furious to hear they'd cancelled the order. They informed me you called it off and suggested I find another supplier, Ryan raged as he stormed back to confront Daniel. Daniel, as calm as ever, explained, Allied was overcharging. I was simply seeking better prices. The argument quickly escalated into a shouting match, eventually ending in a fistfight. I might have underestimated him, Daniel later admitted to me over the phone. But I still landed a few solid punches. I couldn't help but chuckle. Sounds like you've got things under control. Best of luck, Daniel. After hanging up, I sat at my computer, updating my resume and preparing to start a job search. Just as I got into it, the doorbell rang. When I opened the door, there stood Ryan, looking weary. What the hell do you want? I asked, annoyed. We need to talk, Adam, he began, sounding desperate. I didn't mean for things to go this way. Jessica came on to me. I was in a bad place because of Megan. I wasn't thinking straight, but it's not my fault. I stared at him, disgusted. You're saying it's not your fault. You knew she was my wife. You knew the pain I went through when I found out about Megan, and yet you did the same to me. Even if I believe Jessica made the first move, which I don't, you could have turned her down. I turned Megan down when she came on to me. But you? No. You went for it and kept going back for more. You stabbed me in the back, Ryan. He looked defeated but kept pressing. Why did you sell your shares to Daniel? You knew how much trouble he'd cause. I let out a dark chuckle. Because if I'd come after you myself, things might have gone differently. You aren't worth going to jail for. Besides, Daniel will give you enough grief to last far longer than anything I could have done in one confrontation. With that, my patience snapped. I grabbed him by the collar, pulled him inside, and slammed the door shut. I unleashed months of pent-up anger, punching him repeatedly until he slumped unconscious. Then I dragged him out and dropped him in his car, grinning as I went back inside. If the police came, I could easily say he'd attacked me, and I'd acted in self-defense. Given his recent brawl with Daniel, my story would likely hold. The next day, I sent out 14 resumes and then called my lawyer. He mentioned the hearing for the temporary restraining order was scheduled for Monday. Jessica, he said, has yet to hire an attorney. Good, I replied. The longer she delayed, the the more time I had to move forward without her interference. That week, I received several interview offers. I flew to Atlanta on Wednesday and Baltimore on Thursday, feeling good about both. But when I heard from a firm in San Diego, I felt a pull toward warmer climates and arranged an interview there for the following Tuesday. Monday came, and so did the restraining order hearing. To my surprise, the judge found no grounds to uphold it, and I was required to let Jessica back into the house. She arrived with a lawyer who tried to speak with me directly. I calmly told her, "Wait until my attorney is present." "I just wanted to inform you I'll be stopping by tonight," Jessica stated. "No, you won't," I replied. "I have a job interview at 2:30 and won't be back until Wednesday evening. You can come by after 6. Her lawyer attempted to protest, but I cut him off. "She won't set foot in my home without supervision. A court representative will oversee everything, and you're welcome to have your attorney present." "That's unacceptable," he replied. "They won't know what she's taking, and if she removes something inappropriate, it'll be difficult to retrieve it. She's managed without her things for 2 weeks. Another 48 hours won't hurt," I stated firmly. The lawyer sighed, visibly frustrated. "Then we'll wait for the judge's decision," he muttered. Just as they were turning to leave, Jessica stepped forward, looking as if she had more to say. "Forget it. I can wait," Jessica said softly, almost resigned. I nodded. "Wednesday at 6, I confirmed, turning to leave. "Wait a moment, Adam," she called. "Can we talk?" "No," I replied, not looking back as I walked out. The interview in San Diego went well, and I returned home feeling optimistic. On Wednesday at exactly 6 p.m., Jessica arrived with her lawyer and the court-appointed observer. The observer came early, giving us some unexpected time to chat over coffee. She explained her role as a supervisor for the court, tasked with overseeing the retrieval and documenting any disputed items. "There won't be any disputes," I assured her. "She can take whatever she wants." The woman looked at me, a little surprised. "If you're letting her take her things, why oppose her so strongly?" "She betrayed me with my best friend of over 25 years, I replied, keeping my tone steady. I couldn't respond the way I wanted without facing legal consequences, so I made things uncomfortable, gave her a taste of what she put me through. It wasn't much, but it was something. The doorbell rang, and I let Jessica and her lawyer inside, greeting them briefly before stepping out. I had just finished mowing the lawn when I returned to the house. Everyone had left except Jessica, who was seated at the kitchen table, sipping tea. "You lied," she said flatly, not looking up. "You didn't donate my things to Goodwill, did you?" I shrugged. "Maybe not, but I enjoyed watching your reaction when you thought I had." She shook her head, a mix of anger and sadness in her eyes. "Why go through all this if you were planning to leave the house to me? Why the restraining order? The lie about my belongings?" "That's a naive question, Jessica. After what you put me through, I needed some way to feel in control. Just be glad I chose a peaceful solution instead of something more drastic. I couldn't physically hurt you, but I couldn't let you walk away without feeling something." She sighed, leaning forward slightly. "You said you didn't want to talk, but I have to say this. I don't think divorce is the answer." "Let's be realistic," I replied, my voice calm but firm. "After what you've done, this marriage can't be salvaged. But that doesn't change how I feel about you, Adam. You know I love you. Ryan was a mistake, a terrible mistake. I've always liked him, sure, but nothing compares to how I feel about you. I never stopped loving you." I looked at her, unmoved. "Your feelings don't matter now. You went behind my back and had a good time with him. Infidelity is infidelity. And remember when I found out about Megan? You saw how crushed I was. You knew what that betrayal did to me, and you still did the same thing. Doesn't my love for you count for anything?" she asked, her voice almost pleading. "No," It doesn't, I replied bluntly. If you loved me, it would have been enough to stop you from betraying me. But it didn't. It didn't mean anything, she insisted. It was just a mistake, a lapse. It wasn't serious. A lapse? I asked, barely holding back my disbelief. Sleeping with my former best friend was just a lapse in judgment. She paused, gathering her thoughts, then took a deep breath. Ryan came over one night when you were out of town. He was devastated, still torn up over Megan. We had a drink, and he broke down crying. I hugged him to comfort him, and it happened. I knew it was wrong, but in that moment, it felt comforting. Then, the next time you went away, he came back, and we both knew what was going to happen. I took a breath, keeping my anger in check. You knew it was wrong, but you went through with it anyway. It doesn't matter if he was sad or if you were comforting him. You had a choice every step of the way. She reached across the table, her hand resting between us. There was no love, Adam. It was just a moment of weakness, curiosity, maybe even excitement. But I never stopped loving you. I looked at her hand, making no move toward it. That's the problem, Jessica. Love doesn't change what you did. I need a divorce because I can't live with someone who betrayed me. If we stayed together, I'd spend every day looking over my shoulder, wondering when it would happen again. You admitted you enjoyed the thrill. How could I ever trust you again? Her tone grew desperate. I'll do anything to prove that it won't happen again. Anything you want. It's too late, Jessica. You made your choice, I said, shaking my head, feeling a wave of finality settle over me. And besides, your story doesn't even match Ryan's. He says you were the one driving it, that you played him like a game. So, who's lying, you or him? Her face paled, seemingly at a loss for words. I don't know what else to say, Adam. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix anything, I said quietly. You chose to betray me, and there's no going back. Let's just end this. She sat there in silence, and I could see her struggling to accept it. But I knew she felt the truth of my words, there was nothing left to be said. I stood, walked out of the kitchen, and didn't look back. Whatever words or pleas she might still have had didn't matter. I was done. She wasn't ready to give up. I'm not giving up, Adam. I'll fight this divorce, she insisted. We love each other, and I know we can get through this. You're angry, but I'll keep my promises from now on. My lawyer says he can request court-ordered counseling. I love you, Adam. I'm not letting you go. She didn't seem to understand. Jessica, it's not just about being mad at you, I said, exhaling slowly. Yes, I'll admit I still have some feelings. But there's no way I can live with you again. Every time we're together, I'd remember what you did with Ryan, my best friend. You're really going to go through with this? She asked. If you do, I'll release a tape of your last meeting with Ryan, I said coldly. Everyone, family, friends, co-workers, will get a copy. I'll even create a website in your name. You'll have an interesting life after that. Her face fell. That video doesn't exist. Oh. I went to the den, retrieved a disc, and handed it to her. Take a look. After you watch it, decide if you want anyone else to see it. She stared at the disc in shock. Now, I need to get back to my plans. You can pick up the house Friday, but until then, you need to leave. Over the next 2 weeks, I flew to interviews in Salt Lake City, Philadelphia, Atlanta, Chicago, and Detroit. While I felt good about each interview, I hadn't heard back from any companies yet. Running the numbers, I realized I could live comfortably without a job for about 6 years. I even considered moving to a place with a lower cost of living to stretch that time even further. Jessica eventually signed the divorce papers and returned them to my attorney. I felt a mix of satisfaction and slight regret. Part of me would have enjoyed spreading copies of her and Ryan's moments around the house, but a deal was a deal. We agreed on a 50-50th split of the assets, with each of us paying our own legal fees. Jessica kept the house, and my share of the equity cleared my bank loan. I gave her half of what I received from selling my share of the business, but luckily, I had hidden the other 2/3 offshore. Rumors about Jessica and Ryan began circulating. Apparently, with me out of the picture, Ryan's behavior became so controlling that Jessica sought a restraining order against him. The irony amused me, though I wasn't concerned. I waited until the divorce was finalized before making any big moves. Then the calls from companies started. San Diego reached out, asking me to return for a follow-up interview. Before I could arrange it, Daniel called with an unexpected offer. "How'd you like your company back?" "Why would I want that, Daniel? I sold it to you to get away from Ryan. Why would I want to be his partner again?" "You wouldn't," Daniel replied. "But you don't have to." After our last argument, I told him I'd either buy him out or sell his half to someone else. He barely thought about it before selling his half to me, for less than half of what I paid you. I hesitated. Why should I want it back? If you've done what you said to sabotage him, it might not be worth much now. Come see for yourself, Daniel urged. I only bought it to mess with Ryan. Now that I've shifted focus to construction, I'm less interested in engineering. I could contract work to you for engineering services and avoid handling it myself. So, you're selling it back? I asked, intrigued. Yep. It won't cost you much since I've moved all the construction work and equipment to my other company. What's left is pure engineering. I'll sell you the company for what I paid Ryan, plus a 5-year contract for engineering services. And we still have about 15 firm contracts lined up. I was tempted. How much did you give Ryan? The amount he named was less than what I'd put in my offshore account. Sounds reasonable. But what's the catch? There's just one condition, Daniel replied. I don't want any secrets with Maria. I shared the idea with her, and she said that if you agree, she'll stay on with you instead of transferring to my company. You'll get Maria on your team if you take the deal. I didn't have to think long. All right, but I won't finalize anything until my divorce is complete, which should take about 3 weeks. That's fine, Daniel said. We shook on it, and as I left, Maria approached me with a knowing smile. I heard. Don't forget you promised I'd be first on your list, she said. I laughed, surprised by her directness. Didn't think you were serious. Oh, I'm dead serious, she replied with a grin. As I pulled away, my phone rang. It was my lawyer. Apparently, Ryan had finally learned his lesson from what happened with Daniel. When Daniel sued him, Ryan reached out to my lawyer with a settlement offer. I instructed my lawyer to accept. Back at my suite, I allowed myself a moment of relief. In 3 weeks, I'd start a new chapter, with a new job, possibly a new relationship, and a good amount of money in the bank. I could spend those weeks finding a place to live, looking for furniture, and thinking about what the future held. After all, who says nice guys always finish last?